On March 22nd, the Indian Fund and the Indian Tactical Media Team journeyed to so-called Maine to learn about the impact of the Indian Fund CDFI loan of $1.57 million into a project known to us as the Eel Deal. The Passamaquoddy Tribe in Indian Township applied for the loan to revitalize traditional eel harvesting practices and to invest in a sustainable eel aquaculture farm called American Unagi.
We're heading down the trail to river here that's just a bit north of Portland, Maine, and it's about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the tide is right for folks to begin pulling their nets. Hello. How you doing? How'd it go this morning? It's pretty much a custom for the tribe every spring for the first 2-3 weeks of the season. We get up at 3:30 to a hail of swears.
Hail of swears.
How did we get down here anyway?
And right now people are harvesting the eels, and that's what we're seeing right now. In the water, they're in the middle of the water pulling on their nets, I think trying to get the elvers, as they're called, into their buckets.
You see, at this time of the tide, it's shallow enough for them to walk right up. These are fyke nets. You can see why this would be a nice place to fish because it is a natural funnel.
And then they're kind of funneling all the eels to the end.
Right. The eels go into that last portion of the net and they can't get back out. Person over here who has collected their elvers and they're going to reset their net. And you can see how they tie up the end of the net. They'll wrap that, and there's usually a rope around the end of it. And you tie a slip knot on it, which makes it very easy to open.
Were there nets before, or what was the process?
Very different years ago because they weren't harvesting the baby eels. 100 years ago, they were harvesting adult eels. And they would spear them, and they would use different types of nets. You really do need a couple of folks to help out and to make it easier now.
That's why you have like families out here and teaching.
Exactly, yeah. It's monitored and regulated really well.
Yeah. And that's to keep it sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely, yep. That obviously all has to be cleaned.
Oh yeah.
You can see
So
why
we have to clean all that out and separate those little guys from all that stuff.
How long does that usually take you?
Couple hours.
That right there is a perfect baby eel. You can see how active he is. That's really good.
He's a lively guy.
Yeah. Those are really good quality.
Like everybody's got a different role. Not everybody can climb around in that mud.
Right.
If you were doing that by yourself, who's going to hold your rope? Right? So that's what my boys used to do. We used to pay them $50 for carrying buckets every night they went fishing with us. So that's how our boys started, and now they have their own nets all by themselves down on a different river. They went on their own this year. Their dad's shown them for years how to fish, so
That's great.
first time. If you see them and they bring in a catch, they'll be super pumped.
I was checking my eels down in my elver net and picking up our catch, so we did okay this morning. So once the price went up and the tribe started getting, as a whole, more members got involved, it became pretty contentious with the state.
Yeah.
And then it became an exercise of treaty rights and to push against the state. The state tried to limit the amount of permits or Passamaquoddy tribal fishermen on the rivers, and they came with people that were fishing down here in southern part of the state. They summoned them, took their nets, took them to court, but ultimately every tribal member, their case was thrown out of court. There's a large group of Passamaquoddys that come down. There's a sense of community, sense of sharing, sense of teaching. My dad fishes with me, my kids fish with me.
First few years I've been alone by myself. It's my first year fishing. I'm his little brother. I've been watching my dad figure it out the whole time he's really been fishing, just watching and learning from him, and pretty much I've learned everything he's known, learned some things on my own. Felt like I was just watching most of the time, just learning, learning by example, yeah.
It feels amazing. I mean, that's what our ancestors did. It was passed down, and to be able to continue those traditions, to teach my kids, and my granddaughter's been involved, so it's just an amazing feeling.
It's really important to like hand down the knowledge that each generation has down to the next generation. It keeps our traditions alive, really. That's how I feel about it. I know I've always learned all the traditions from my father, and I know my kids will learn from me.
When I first started, my boys were young. They watched me fish, and now they're off on a river by themselves doing good away from me. So I'm proud to see they're actually doing better than I am.
So first night we caught 7.36 pounds, and tonight's probably 4.5.
Yeah, it's nice, especially to catch that much your first year. First 2 nights, you know, feeling like beginner's luck, but yeah, it's nice, good feeling.
Price per pound has been really steadily going up past few years. I remember when my dad first started, we were excited it got to $900 a pound, and yesterday when we cashed in, it was at $1,800 to start the year.
It's a generational thing, passing on traditions. It's the culture of relearning our fisheries. We've had the traditional knowledge that we've held on to, although it wasn't getting passed down through all the families just because it just kind of was put to the side for a bit. And we were in survival mode for a long time, and now we're starting to take advantage of our right to fish, and now that traditional knowledge is coming back and getting spread out amongst all the family members. And to me, it's a reconnection to culture.
To learn more about the historical ties of eel harvesting and the Passamaquoddy people, we traveled to the Passamaquoddy Reservation in Princeton, Maine, where tribal elder and historian Donald Soctomah hosted us.
The eels are an important food source in our tribe, has always been. Previously, the tribe would set up eel harvesting areas. And when the big eels came down from the rivers, you know, we're talking eels 4 or 5 feet long, you know, and about this round. And there'd be traps set for them, and there'd be people with spears. The eels have been part of our traditions forever. We have them in our legends. We have all kinds of stories, thousands of years old. This was made by a tribal artist. It's a birch bark basket. It's a traditional basket, and on it is medicinal plants. And here is a large eel, which is so important in our culture. All the animals are tied into some of our legends, our stories from the past, and stories to be told in the future. The actual eel trap that was used, it's shaped like almost like a horn, and the big eels will swim right into them, and they never go backwards. So they get stuck right in there. And just a matter of time, you pick up the bucket and the trap. In the olden days, when an eel is caught, it's buried in the sand, and it's buried alive. And as it's alive, it's swirling its body like this, and it's actually cleaning all the slime off of it. Yeah. So when it's ready, a fire is built over the eel, and it's cooked underneath the ground, and then you can eat it. You can eat the skin and all, because it'll be so clean. Quite a few species of animals disappeared after the settlers. Their numbers increased. They lived in harmony with the tribe, you know, because they were here, and the tribe never harvested anything to its max like that. We always made sure there were some left behind to replenish themselves. In the springtime, we'd have our whole village on the river. And then 100 years ago, the salmon stopped because they couldn't make it upriver. They weren't as tough as the eels. So that part of the tradition of salmon hunting, fishing, sort of fell to the wayside. I'm happy to know that people are back on the water, because this time of year is when people would have been harvesting salmon, but the settlers have wiped out the salmon by putting dams up and the dams kept the flow, the natural flow of eels going upriver and going back to the ocean. It prevented that. Eels were an important food, a ceremonial food. Community members had a hard time finding eels back then because they couldn't do the traditional track. But after the fishways were installed, the numbers came back into the thousands. You know, the settlers have changed everything. So we have to adapt to survive.
After we spoke with Donald, we sat down with Indian Fund's Director of Lending, Tani Wilson, to learn more about how Indian Fund's braided capital approach offered capacity building and power building resources, and Stan Meader, an enrolled citizen of the Passamaquoddy Tribe in Indian Township, who told us how Indian Fund's approach to lending was different.
We were offered the opportunity by American Unagi to buy almost a 12% stake in their business, and that was something that we considered very, very valuable.
Because of the way that the Passamaquoddy Tribe at Indian Township has been established, they do not have true tribal sovereignty. The Passamaquoddy Tribe itself could not guarantee the loan per se.
We knew we were at a real disadvantage when it came to accessing capital, finding somebody that would loan to us.
He made the phone call, he reached out, he let us know what the vision of the tribe was, what they envisioned happening, bringing back the eels, bringing back jobs, you know, creating opportunity for tribal members.
Because as a tribe, we have a quota of baby eels that our fishermen are allowed to harvest every spring. But historically, we've only harvested. We haven't done anything beyond that. We haven't raised them, we haven't sold them, we haven't processed them or smoked them. And those jobs historically have only existed in Asia.
They had this vision of getting their tribal harvesters back into the water, creating not only just economic development, but reproducing that food system that had been lost throughout the years, and providing food access, food security, and also creating livable wages for the tribal harvesters.
They understood that this project meant that our tribal harvesters would be paid more for their catches every spring.
Accessing debt capital is a barrier that has really limited our tribe's ability to create and move economic development forward. And so when we talk about debt capital, it's basically just a loan. So Indian Collective created Indian Fund, which is an emerging CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution, to bring that access, to bring the capital to the table.
The money meant that we could make the investment, but then kind of what else did we need to be thinking about relative to that investment and the future? And we just together worked through a lot of obstacles over time.
We do this type of work because it's so vital and needed in Indian country. Nobody else in the financing world is doing this type of braided capital access.
The prices that our harvesters have historically gotten have almost doubled, which is huge to a rural community.
Power building for us allows us to step in and help our potential loan relatives remove that barrier to get to the next level.
The price equity finally exists for tribal eel harvesters.
Charlie, Lorenzo, this is Liam.
Liam, nice to meet you, Lorenzo.
You're gonna see a lot of eels in tanks. Eels of all sizes, shapes, along with delicious eel products. So we just built this and finished construction this past year. So
Oh wow, it's like
2022. To build a building and put a business like this together, it takes a lot of planning, putting together the right team, and that took us, well, from the very start in the basement, 8 years to get to this.
let's go in.
Welcome, welcome. So come on through.
American Unagi.
Yeah.
Wow, how many eels are in here?
So right now we have about 750,000. So we're able, when we're up fully and full of eels, to have around 2 million. So this is a land-based recirculating aquaculture system. So what you're looking at right now is actually 2 systems Because we're getting them from the wild, we let them be themselves. So this size fish, they're training right now. So what's happening is this feed is dropping in, and then they're actually learning to use the on-demand feeders.
Oh.
So if you actually look over here, you'll see the fish feeding themselves.
Wow, that's what they're like grabbing this thing and moving it so the food falls off.
Oh yeah, they know it. These fish are they're incredible.
Now this morning we saw people harvesting, and they're harvesting these little tiny translucent eyeballs.
Yeah.
How long does it take for them to get like this color and sort of like become, I guess, what we would think of as an eel, you know?
So it's actually very quick when they come into our farm and start eating that they will turn and pigment, and then they become yellow eels usually within a month. And then it can take for them to reach market anywhere from 8-9 months to up to over 2 years. What I saw here in Maine was an opportunity in that we have this really unique eel fishery, but the entirety of that fishery was getting exported mostly to farms in China. They're growing them there, and then we were buying them back for sushi. And I said, why isn't anybody doing this locally? Why aren't we keeping these fish here to grow them out, to add value?
I saw some information on them and what they were trying to do with eels. And I said, we have a quota for eels. We're only participating in the harvest side. Why can't we participate in the value-added side and grow them and process them and smoke them and do those things?
Making sure that we had living wage jobs, benefits, and have a job where people can live in the area and be here. The fishery is extremely valuable to the state. It's a 10-week fishery and not everybody's able to fish. But then when you add a business like this, it's year-round production, but year-round jobs and living wage jobs with benefits and support.
We never would have been able to get this together without NDN.
We need diversification, but we're rural, and there's certain things that are not a good fit, and aquaculture is a really great fit, and eels specifically.
Absolutely. Eels more than anything.
And we reuse and recycle all of our water. So we do have 10% of the water that we clean up and discharge, but other than that, everything is reused.
Reuse, that's incredible.
The waste comes out here, goes down in. So we actually collect the solids, and then we treat it in the back of our building. When we pull those solids out, we're actually working with our landowner on a fertilizer.
Well, that's pretty amazing. It's also kind of compact, huh?
Yeah.
There's so much going on in here, and it's like this one facility, and it's producing a lot of eels.
Yeah. So then the other cool thing with our business is that we actually process all of our eels too. We can sell our eels live, but we can also process them into products that are easier to use for people. Most people don't want a live eel showing up in their kitchen. So after the eels are large enough, we harvest them. So then they go through to the other side of our building where we're able to process them into incredible products. So come on this way. We're actually unique in that we're processing and making the value-added products right here on the same site.
Our own processing operation was born out of the pandemic out of necessity, but as soon as we had a value-added product, a processed product that we'd be able to store, it gained a lot of popularity, and chefs haven't had the opportunity to work with a raw filet. Everything that's coming over from Asia is pre-cooked, pre-sauced, and so instead of having a product for them to work with, they actually have an ingredient, and it was very exciting for them to have an ingredient to actually work with and have that sort of flexibility. And so by being able to not only do the farming here, but the processing here, it means that we're doing all of the value add to the product. We're creating marketing jobs and sales jobs, and it's going really well. Liam and Kelsey have prepared a feast.
Well, let's go get to it. Let's get some eating.
So now is the best part where you get to eat the fish. You guys ready to eat some eel?
Yes.
Oh, that's so good. How you doing?
Tired as FCK.
Can I give you a hand?
Oh, I got it. I'm just right there, yeah.
Sure.
If I don't keep going, I'm never going to do it. It just brings me joy to see the community out there again.
This, hands down, is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done.
It's so much more than a loan to us.
Eels has been part of our culture for thousands of years. They cared about that.
We will do everything we can to make sure our lone relatives are successful.
Seeing the kids out there helping their families, you know, the 3 generations of folks that we saw doing it and doing it well and helping their families and knowing that that improves their housing, that improves their health and wellness. It's an impact way, way beyond the money.
Now our people are back out there harvesting the elvers, so that tradition continues. So it's bringing that tradition back.